Welcome to our students at Pleasantville High School. There are 19 of them, and they're in our dual high school credit program and early college high school students. And they are earning Stockton University credits for attending their Holocaust and Genocide Studies class this summer, being taught by our Stockton graduate, Darren Babnew. Mr. Babnew, hello, and we're all clapping. I hope everybody is, because those students are amazing, and they've had many achievements along the way. And I want everyone to know that I worked with the class last week, and their knowledge is vast. I am so impressed. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to all of you for joining us for the fourth annual, can you believe, four years, the Wally and Lutz Hammerschlag Summer Educator Seminar. Thank you so much for being with us today. And as we begin, I want you to meet Leonard Hammerschlag. And Leonard is the son of Wally, his mom, and Lutz, his dad, Hammerschlag. And Leonard is, although lives in South Africa, is here today at the Jersey Shore. And I just wanted to give you a little background about the Hammerschlag family. So we always start with our parents. And Lutz, who was Leonard's dad, lived in Lauenau, Germany. Not too far from Hanover in the north, a small town, maybe about 1,000 inhabitants, at the time of Kristallnacht, November 9th to 10th, 1938. And Lauenau did have some Jewish families. They were integrated into pretty much part of the town life. And therefore, when Kristallnacht happened, the Jews of Lauenau weren't fully aware about Kristallnacht. And some thought, we're kind of like an island. Nothing bad happened here. And there were some folks who came, Jews that came from other towns thinking they would be insulated in Lauenau. Of course, we know that wasn't true. And Leonard's father, Wally, was able to obtain employment in a kind of auto repair place where he couldn't go through the front door, but the employer said, come in the back door. I'm going to teach you a trade because who knows what's going to happen in the future. Just around that same time of Kristallnacht, we'll talk about Wally, Leonard's mother, who was an eyewitness to Kristallnacht. So her history is so much different, although they both lived in Germany at the time, and she lived in Frankfurt. And we have given to you an essay that she wrote as an eyewitness to Kristallnacht. She wrote it years later when she was made what we call Aliyah. She moved to Israel, which all of you know was became an independent state country in 1948. Prior to that, it was called Palestine. And we'll do the essay in a minute because I want to finish the story. How did they meet, Wally and Lutz Hammerschlag? Both families were able to obtain visas and go to Bulawayo, Rhodesia, where Lutz, knowing a lot about cars, and there is a link between knowing about cars and teaching people to drive, opened up a driving school. And guess what happened? When Wally arrived in Bulawayo, her parents said, you know what? You're going to have to learn to drive. And that's how they met. And the rest is a romance, and they were married there. And that's where their family began. So I want to introduce to you Leonard, who's going to read from the essay that you all have, because before we know it and school starts, it's November. And I hope so many of you who are teaching Holocaust and genocide studies do at least a day or 2 or 3 on Kristallnacht, which Elie Wiesel termed the beginning of the end and the end of the beginning. So I'm honored to say my friend, Leonard Hammerschlag.
Hello, everybody. Just going to take 1 minute. I'd like to thank all of you, especially the educators that have taken time out from their busy summer vacations. The last thing you want to be doing is sitting at home and watching something, but you've really, what you teach is very, very important, and we're all very appreciative of your time that you've taken. A special thank you to the Pleasantville High School class. Well done. And to the South African educators, welcome. I don't actually live in South Africa. I spend my summers in Cape Town. Okay, so thank you very much, Gail, for letting me talk a little bit. So I'm just going to read a very short sentence, a paragraph rather, from a letter that was written by my mother. Kristallnacht was her defining moment. When you read the letter, you'll see that she never forgot it, but never really spoke very much about it like most of the people back then. So this letter was written 50 years later in 1988 when she was living in Israel. On the 9th of November 1938, the situation took a very violent turn. This is a day that, try I may, I will never be able to erase from my memory. That morning, I walked to school with 2 friends, as usual. Being November, it was still dark outside and very cold. As we happily turned the corner to the school, we saw huge flames leaping from the building and realized that the whole school was on fire. The reaction was mixed. Some were happy. There would be no school for some time, but all of us were very frightened and realized that something terrible had happened. Okay?
Yes, thank you, Leonard. And how did Leonard and I get together for the purpose of education? Is that Leonard wanted to build an exhibit, an exhibition dedicated to his parents' life, using Kristallnacht as the centerpiece of it. And so we did do that. And it's in Ventnor, right near the border of Ventnor and Atlantic City. And it is in a synagogue. So many of our students have never been to a synagogue before. And we've combined that with the experience of going to a synagogue and seeing an exhibition dedicated to Kristallnacht. Leonard is available in the fall, probably through November, if you're interested in bringing your students. And here's the last part. We do have some funding available for busing. So please contact us. Morgan will put in the chat our phone number here at the Holocaust Resource Center. If any of you would like to bring your students, or if you want to make it a drop-in event, meaning we've had that where schools where if you're interested to have mom and dad drive you and it will be after hours, that's fine too. And as long as it's on a weekday. So I encourage you, and we'll let Leonard say something else about it, but I encourage you to bring your students.
Okay, I'm sorry, I forgot one of the most important things. On behalf of everybody attending and me personally, I'd like to thank Professor Gale and her 2 assistants, Morgan and Irvin, without whom none of this would have been possible. So thank you very much, guys. You're very professional and you always do a wonderful job, and I'm sure you'll do it again today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Leonard.
Finished.
Okay, thank you. And when you bring your students, we have lots of teaching materials to give you to prepare them. And then we have materials to give your students when they leave. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. And again, Morgan or Irvin, if you just put our phone number in the chat So folks know to call us to arrange a bus trip there. So moving on, here's the nuts and bolts for today. As we say, by email after our event today, our workshop seminar today, you will receive your PDH, professional development hours. You will receive an evaluation, and we encourage you please to fill out the evaluations. Number one, it helps us to plan for the future. Number two, when we continue, everything we do is free. We share the evaluations with our sponsors to show them how they're making a difference. If you misheard something today, or you want to listen to it again, or you have a friend that you want to pass this on to, this is being recorded and it will be available on our website. It takes a couple weeks to edit the recordings, but we assure you by the end of the summer, these will be up on our website. We have a change in our schedule for today. First, all of you know that Betty Karpinchikov was scheduled to be with us. I want to assure you, you will be receiving her book. And I want to assure you that in October, because she had a conflict with today, she is going to do a seminar with all of you and others who couldn't attend today. So Betty was an eyewitness to Kristallnacht, and that's why in preparation for Kristallnacht, she will present a seminar. Each of you will receive her book prior, and that is funded by Harvey and Maddie Ravinsky Adopt a Survivor program. And if you want a classroom set of her books after you read it, of her book, and it's on the 5th grade reading level, but chock full of such good information, we will provide classroom sets for any of you. So again, you have our phone number, you have my name, you have our website, which is in the chat. We have with us today, and he will speak in a minute, Doug Survey from the New Jersey Commission on Holocaust Education. He is providing for you, which we will also send to you, Maud Dami's book. And yesterday, Maud called to say, I'm fine, but I have this conflict for today. And I didn't want her to feel guilt. I didn't want her to feel badly about it. I said, Maud, you will be rescheduled. So we've changed up the program a little bit, and I will share about that with you in a few minutes. But we have first here with us greetings from our dual high school credit program, which some of us don't know what that's about. So Steve Marcus, you're on just to share with us what is dual high school credit. And again, I'm going to ask my colleagues to put in the chat how they get in touch with Steve about dual high school credit. Steve, will you tell me what that's about?
Good morning, everybody. It's very nice to be able to see people after not seeing people. And we've got some good friends here, and we've got some new people. And we right now have 10 of our dual credit teachers online. There are 14 signed up. So the dual credit program, I don't know whose brainchild it was. I'd like to say it was mine, but it wasn't. In 2014, we started a partnership with two schools, Holy Spirit High School and Vineland High School. And when I came on, there were two schools, and we very rapidly added to 5 to 8 to 11, to the point where we are adding with Kittatinny Regional High School, two representatives that are here today. We're adding our 31st school, mostly in South Jersey, but we've been given the go-ahead to expand. And so, you know, if you folks in South Africa want to we'll figure out a way to do it. But what happens is we identify schools who either have a Holocaust and genocide program or would like a Holocaust and genocide program. And we go in there and we work with them and we evaluate to the point where we approve teachers, we train teachers, we give professional development year-round to teachers through Sara and Sam Schoffer Holocaust Resource Center, General Studies, the minor in Holocaust genocide. It's a great partnership. And the way this works is that students obtain the high school credit and have the opportunity to gain 4 credits from Stockton University in general studies. Basically, the cost is $400 per student, which equates to $100 a credit. But because of the laws in the state of New Jersey, those who are on free and reduced lunch obtain the credits for free. So it's been extremely successful. We're always looking for new schools. And we were restricted by a 50-mile limitation until about a year and a half ago. And with our plans to expand greatly came a pandemic. So we put everything kind of on the back burner, but we're ready to go. And, this not only includes constant professional development, but we generally send our teachers, and Stanley will tell you a little bit more about this, Jewish Foundation for the Righteous. We've sent teachers, or we help teachers go to China, all other places. And professional development for students includes virtual trips, real trips to the Holocaust Resource Center, to the synagogue in Ventnor to see the Hammerschlag exhibit. And we help support trips to New York City, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. So we work very closely. It's a consortium. I'm hoping I'm doing a good job. People seem happy, and I'm very, very pleased that about half of our teachers are here today. I think Morgan put my information in the chat, but it is stephen.marcus@stockton.edu. And I'd be extremely happy to hear from new people, because we want to expand. We want to give your kids the opportunity to join the consortium. So thanks. And I'm sure that if you have any questions later, I will be able to answer them.
Yes. So thank you, first of all, Steve, for saying about questions. So we will have a time, because we're going to have a transition into, we have a 2-part section where there can be questions for Steve, for Stanley Stahl. We'll tell you who Stanley is in a minute or two, and Doug Survey. One thing I just want to add to Steve's presentation is those 4 credits that students earn in your high schools are transferable to 99% of the colleges, universities they will be applying to or attending. We've had Princeton, Penn, Rutgers. I could give you the long list. It is rare. The only exceptions are some small private colleges. We've had a harder time transferring the credits, but 99% of them can transfer the credits. We share our syllabi with the other colleges, universities, and all of them have accepted our dual high school credit. Credits.
Yeah, between Gail and I, we try to make them an offer they can't refuse.
And the last part is, which I never expected, and if you have a student in this situation, you will relate to what I'm saying. We have some students that reluctantly took dual high school credit and afterwards said, I never knew that I could go to college. I never knew that the work that I was doing would be accepted at a college or a university. And so we have a certain percentage of our dual high school credit students that transition here to Stockton or other state universities that we know we're not in a college-bound necessarily program. So I encourage you, if you're in a high school, you're not part of it, and you're in a middle school, talk to your high school folks about it. And we're going to move on to our last representative, and then we're going to formally begin our program. And that's Doug Survey on behalf of the New Jersey Commission on Holocaust Education. Doug.
Good morning, everybody. And if my dog starts barking because a UPS truck goes by, I apologize beforehand. I'm Doug Survey. I'm the Executive Director of the New Jersey Commission on Holocaust Education. I also teach at Stockton as an adjunct. Was where I got my master's degree along with Steve Marcus. We were in the same class together. He's done a phenomenal job. It's incredible the amount of students that have been able to go through that program and get credits. And then actually several of them have actually gone on to get their master's degree, which is really an impressive thing. Good morning, Judy. My boss is here, so I have to make sure I know what I'm doing as well. I have put in the chat our contact information. Brianna, who is my executive assistant, is also here today. If you have any questions for what we do at the commission, we provide resources. Some of you may or may not know that we have a curriculum from K to 4, 5 to 8, and 9 through 12, all of which are being revised. We have the old curriculums that are up on our website right now if you want to check that out. We have an ongoing calendar of events that take place throughout the state and also around the country that Brianna puts on our website. So if you need information on that, you're more than welcome to participate. We have sponsored a trip since 1996 through the commission. And if you're an NJEA member and you want to go visit the sites, obviously with COVID, that's been canceled the last 2 years. I strongly suggest if you want to be involved in this program, that will be a life-changing experience for you. It also brings a lot as far as when you come back to your classroom, when you're able to show photographs and now PowerPoints. I still have my slides with a carousel, and my college students look at me like, what is this? They have no idea. It's almost like a rotary phone. And they start laughing, but I've been unable to transfer them to a PowerPoint. I had 6 students when I taught in high school that told me the Holocaust did not happen. And that's one of the reasons I went on the trip, because you said, how do you know you weren't there? So I went, and I've been there 3 times. So if you have any things that you need from us, we can also, as we have done today, we'll provide you with a copy of Maud's book. But if you read that book or any of the 75 books that have been done that you prefer over some of the other books that you may have used, I think Sean Riggins got a class size set of Betty's book that he requested. The state will provide that for you. If you need those books, just contact us with the contact information, and we'd be more than happy to work something out with you. Like I said, NJEA will help fund about $2,500 of the trip to Europe. We have plans to go next year, assuming that the COVID thing doesn't break out and everybody gets vaccinated. And so then we can move on with that. But at this point, we do plan on going. And if things do work out, that'll take place at the end of July and the first week of August. Thank you very much. You should have a very enjoyable day today as far as the information that you're going to be presented. The quality of stuff that you'll receive from Stanley is over the top. I know that firsthand, having participated in that program. The film that you're going to watch today is an incredible film, and I would suggest that you read the book first. I actually emailed the author. He's very good about answering questions, along with showing the film in the classroom. The students are just basically stunned. So thank you very much. Have an enjoyable 3 days. And I'm so happy my dog did not start barking.
Thank you, Doug. And because we had a few of you who had some issues getting on to our site, I just want to briefly say that after today's session, you will by email receive your PDH evaluation of today's seminar. Please, it's so important for us for future funding, for future planning. Please complete the evaluation. And our session is being recorded today. It will take a few weeks to get it edited, but it will be up on our website. Everyone today will be receiving 2 books. One, the memoir of Betty Karpinchikov, and the other, and that is being funded by Maddie and Harvey Rovinsky, Adopt Survivor Classroom Project. And the other book will be Maud Dommy's book, Chocolate, the Taste of Freedom. And each of those survivors will be doing their own workshop with us due to circumstances. They each had to rearrange their schedules, and there were issues with today. So thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. The last brief advertisement is for our Master of Arts in Holocaust and Genocide Studies. And those of you that are looking to further your education, we encourage you to apply. We have Brianna, I know, is in our program. We have Irvin, who is in our program. You can, Irvin, will you put your contact? And Morgan, who is one of the administrators for the master's program. Raz Siegel is a director. He was unable to be with us today, but I encourage you to get in touch if it interests you. Yes, 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 we have scholarship money available, and you can talk to Irvin and Morgan about it because they are both recipients. And it often comes down to that there's only a small investment you have to make into our graduate program. Someone posted that they haven't received the Zoom link for the next 2 days yet. Yes, that is correct. You will not receive it until late today. Due to security reasons, we don't send out the Zoom link in advance. So this is why. You will receive it later today. And you can email us first thing in the morning if you don't have it. So it is my honor and privilege to introduce, and I really mean it when I say my friend for, and I'm just going to say it, we figured it out this morning, Stanley Stahl, Executive Director of the Jewish Foundation for the Righteous. Stanley has taught me so much. Number one, she has taught me to always teach about from despair comes hope. This is what our students need today. This is why we invited Stanley to come. And this is why we titled our workshop, Lessons of Hope. And we even broke it down for you. Lessons of hope about rescue, resistance, and faith. Tomorrow will be our day, and it's not too late to register for tomorrow. Tomorrow will be our day dedicated to faith. Today is our day dedicated to rescue and resistance. Jewish Foundation for the Righteous started about 30 years ago, around the time I met Stanley. And it's a multifaceted organization. Stanley will explain to you that it began by noting and making sure all of us knew about those who changed history. Rescuers changed history and saved many in so many Nazi-occupied countries. And I don't want to say any more because Stanley is our expert on rescue and resistance. And in my introduction, we both agreed that I will tell the story of Jan, and I'm going to put that right in the box because I made a promise to Jan and Halim Mazur. Hold on, and I'm putting their names in so you will learn their stories. About 10 years ago, I was in Krakow for leading a group, and our Holocaust survivor, Suswine, Paula, and I'm going to put her name in because her grandchildren made a short film about her life. Paula was what we call Shomer Shabbos. She is an Orthodox Jew. She currently lives in Israel. She worked in New York for many years as a social worker. After the war, she came here to New York. And Paula wanted somebody to go to synagogue services with her. And 99% of our students that were on the trip from Stockton University were not Jewish. They had been to a synagogue. We had taken them to a synagogue service, but we didn't want them to have to sit through the service. So my colleague and friend, Dr. Michael Hayes, took our Stockton students for a walking tour on the Jewish Sabbath, and I went to synagogue with Paula. And after synagogue, we went to the area where her grandfather prayed in a steeple. That means like a small little synagogue that was in an apartment complex. We walked into the complex. It was typical for Krakow and for most of Poland, where the apartments have a square in the middle and there are 4 buildings that surround it. And when we walked into the square, a little old man came down. I can tell you exactly what he was wearing, those overalls that farmers, I call them farmers overalls that have the clasp on it. One clasp was broken and the other clasp was able to hook. He came down and he said, "You must be visitors. I want to tell you my story." And of course, he's speaking in Polish that Paula can understand. And she's translating to me. "I want to tell you my story. I saved Jews during the war." Paula grabbed my arm. She said, "Oh, this is what happens when you go out walking. So many people say they saved Jews, but their stories aren't always necessarily true." She said, "Let's leave. I don't want to hear," and these are her words, "I don't want to hear his lies." I said, "Okay." And he turns to us and said, "Will you come to our apartment with meet my wife and come to our apartment for tea?" Oh, how are we going to get out of this? She really wants to leave. So I told her, "Tell him I work for the state of New Jersey and I have to always track and tell them where I'm going. He's not on our itinerary." And that sounded like a pretty good excuse. And he's arguing with us, "Please come." And we look up and those rickety steps from his apartment going down is his wife. She was wearing a dress that my mother would say, "Don't wear it out, just around the house." And she had a paper bag with her, just like you would carry from ShopRite or Giant. But it said on it, Super Soul. And Super Soul is the ShopRite of Israel. What in Poland? How did they get that bag? This is really something. I said, "Paula, let's wait a minute. She's carrying a Super Soul grocery bag. How did she get that? What's in that bag?" She comes down and opens the bag. And in the bag are their medals, Righteous Among the Nations, that they saved Jews during the war. And then, I don't know why, but I said, "Do you know my friend Stanley Stahl?" I thought that's going to even further validate it. And they said, "Oh yes, Stanley brings us money. We receive money from her to help us to live because no one knows what we did during the war." And then they went on to tell me their story, which perhaps Stanley will add to. And the bottom line was that they worked in a factory that made officers' uniforms for the German army. And they hid Jews at night. And when the sun came out, the Jews would run out into the forest. And they were in charge of that operation in the factory. But they wanted to let us know that the factory supervisor knew what they were doing and others. They had others helping them. And they wanted me to know that their son also helped, that he worked in the pharmacy that was right adjacent part of the the Krakow ghetto. And so they said, "Will you continue to tell our story?" And I made that promise. So now I told you, I hope you pass on their story, how they changed history and saved Jews during the war. And here I am in Krakow. And Stanley Stahl has made a difference in 2 lives of those that rescued Jews during the war. This is Stanley's work. And I'm now passing the program on to Stanley. Stanley has a PowerPoint. At the end of the PowerPoint, we're going to take your questions, and then we're going to transition into the program dedicated to Roddy Edmonds. And I will have a comment then. Thank you, Stanley, for joining us and being part of us today.
Thank you, Gail. And I'd like to thank Gail, Irvin, Morgan, and the good folks at Stockton for holding the program and for inviting me to join with you this morning. For those of you in the United States, it's morning. And for those of you who are elsewhere, good day. And I'd like to also thank each of you for taking, whether you're here for the 1 day, 2 days, or 3 days, for taking time off of your summer vacation to study a very important topic. I think Gail emphasized that, as did Doug Survey and Stephen Marcus. To me, the Shoah was a seminal event of the last century. And I'm going to share my screen, but I want to just say, it is wonderful to see so many JFR Alfred Lerner Fellows. Some of you, like Rachel and Sean, I just saw because they came to our Columbia University program online, and to Leanne, who is in Pennsylvania, and Maureen in Florida, and all of Gail's wonderful teachers who have come to our program at Columbia. Thank you. And to everyone else, I hope to see you sometime at other programs, especially in New Jersey. I talk fast. And so I think Morgan or Irvin's going to put in the chat, if you don't understand something, put it in the chat, let me know. And I will get back to you, if not during this program. I'm available by email, telephone, etc. So when I talk about rescue, I always like to know, and if you can please put it in the chat, how many of you who are currently teaching the Holocaust include the study or include a component of the rescue of Jews by non-Jews during the Shoah? So if you can put it in the chat, it'll give me some understanding. I am going to share my screen, and I'm going to do this. Are you able to see it? Gail, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Is there a way, Irvin, to make it a little bigger, or maybe not? There we go. Yes.
Okay. This morning, I'm going to talk about the mirror of goodness. I'm going to talk about non-Jews who, during the Holocaust, risked their lives to save Jews. So if you look at rescue, we're talking about Europe in the 1940s was mostly Christian. However, there were some Muslims who risked their lives to save their Jewish friends, neighbors, relatives, and strangers from death. Most of the men and women that have been recognized by the state of Israel, Yad Vashem, their Holocaust authority, are Christian. There are Muslims in Albania, and when I grew up, it was known as Yugoslavia. So this morning, we're going to look at rescue during the Holocaust, and my focus is going to be primarily on Poland. The majority of rescue occurred in Poland, but what you need to know is that rescue occurred in every country that was occupied by the Germans and their collaborators. Important to note, with the exception of Denmark, each country's mass murders were preceded by a series of violation of rights, regardless of the country. There were 4 stages to the annihilation of the Jews of Europe. The first was identification who was a Jew. The second was expropriation of property and removal from employment or school. And the third stage was isolation. Jews were ordered into the ghetto. It is at this point, the isolation of Jews, the ghettoization of Jews, that it became too difficult for a non-Jew to save a Jew or for a Jewish person to save him or herself. What you need to know is that there were rescuers in every country that was occupied by the Germans and their collaborators. And the fourth stage was annihilation. So this morning I said, I'm going to focus in on Poland. So it's important to understand a little bit about pre-war Jewish life in Poland. In 1939, Poland had the largest concentration of Jews. Jewish people comprised 10% of the Polish population, yet they were least assimilated. Poles and Jews lived in different worlds. Most of the Poles were agrarian. They were in the countryside. The Jews lived in towns, villages, and larger cities. The Polish farmer would bring their grain, their crops into the city, into the larger villages, to the Jewish miller, to the baker. And so the interaction between Jews and Poles was one of commercial, not social. And it could be said that many, not all, but many felt like a stranger in each other's world. So after Germany invaded Poland on September 1, 1939, and World War II broke out, very few Jews gave serious thought to survival outside of the ghetto. And Jews clung to the false hope that as bad as things were, they would not get worse. They remember World War I. They will tell you, if you talk to survivors, most of whom who were alive during World War I or have passed on now, they will say the Germans were not that bad. They had choiceless choices: to leave the ghetto, to pass as an Aryan, a non-Jew, to go into hiding, to go east to the Soviet Union, who didn't want the Jews, to go west, where Nazi Germany had already started invading the Low Countries by May of 1940. Choiceless choices. Remember, they didn't have the internet. So escape to the Christian world, to the Aryan side, was a major undertaking, even if a Jewish person had plans. So let me tell you the story of Alexander Roslin. It is March 1943. And for those of you who know your history, the Warsaw Ghetto, which was established years before and was maybe had 425,000 inhabitants, was down to about 50,000. The Great Deportation in 1942, that summer, July to September, 300,000 Jews were taken from the Warsaw Ghetto to Treblinka, where upon arrival, they were murdered. So it's March of 43. The ghetto is coming to an end. Hannah takes off her armband. The Jews of Warsaw wore white armbands with the Star of David. They did not wear a yellow star. She takes her armband off. She goes into the sewer. She goes through the sewers, comes up on the Christian side of Warsaw, and goes to the apartment of a pre-war employee, only to learn that he'd been picked up by the Gestapo for being a black marketeer. She's sitting on the steps, and a man comes down and sits next to her, and he sees she's distraught. And he says, "Honey, lady, what's the problem?" And she says, "I'm a Jewess. I was looking for," and his name was Stanislav, "because I was hoping he would help me get my three nephews, David, Jacob, and Shalom Gutgeld, out of the ghetto." And without asking his wife, named Mela, this is Alexander, he says, "We will take your nephews." Their father had left Poland in August of 1939 and had gone into the Soviet Union to figure out, because the winds of war were coming, to figure out a way to get his family out of Poland. The war started, he was trapped in Poland. The boy's mother had died of starvation in the ghetto, is buried in the mass grave. And she'd been taking care of her three nephews, and they had survived to March of 1943. They figure out a plan to get the three boys out of the ghetto one at a time. And when Alexander goes upstairs and tells his wife, they have two children, we're going to, take these 3 Jewish boys, and I invited Aunt Hannah to come too. Mela says, my God, if we're caught, we'll be killed. And Alexander talks to her and says, what did these little boys do that deserves that they get to be killed? We have a moral and a religious responsibility to take care of these children. And he says to Hannah, you come too. And she says, I have so few friends left in ghetto, no family. The festival holiday of Passover is coming. Let me stay in ghetto and I will come right after Passover. The final liquidation of the Warsaw Ghetto occurred on April 19th, 1943. That night was the first night of Passover, was the first Seder. Hannah was picked up and was sent to Auschwitz and never heard from again. Alexander and Mela took care of the boys. The baby died. Both Alexander's son and Shalom was the baby. Alexander's son got typhus. He went into a hospital because he was Catholic, and he gave his parents half of the medicine, hopefully that Shalom would survive. Shalom died. So here's Alexander living in Warsaw, the capital city of Poland, with a dead Jewish boy, about 5 years old. He buries him in the earthen floor of their apartment building at 2 a.m. Move forward to August of 1944, you have the Polish Uprising, which the Germans squashed, and they ordered the entire civilian population of Warsaw to evacuate the city. It's at this point that many people in Warsaw who were hiding Jews said, you know what, you're on your own. Alexander and Mela didn't. They racked David and Jacob Gutgeld because you never judge a book by its cover, but they didn't look like Alexander and his wife. And they wrapped their heads with bandages and put a hat on them, and they kept them safe. At the end of the war, they all survived. Alexander took the 2 boys back to the Jewish community, and they were reunited with their father, and they went to then Palestine, now the state of Israel. One of the boys became a neurophysicist at the Weizmann Institute, which is equivalent to RMIT, and the other became a mathematician and was a professor at Tel Aviv University. So this is a story about someone, if you look at the last bullet, escape to the Christian world was a major undertaking, even if someone had plans and someone to help them. So who would try to pass as an Aryan, as a non-Jew? Someone young, someone without family ties, someone who spoke Polish without a trace of Jewishness. So I can go to you, Dzień dobry, Państwu, dziękuję bardzo. I can talk to you in Polish. And for those of you who are native, are there any here? Know that I am not a Polish, a native Polish speaker. In the 1932 census of Poland, only 12% of the Jews responded that they spoke Polish. Their first language was Yiddish. Someone who was assimilated. And again, you never judge a book by its cover, but someone whose physical appearance conformed to the Polish look, to the Aryan look. Therefore, most Jews had to go into hiding. The religious, the uneducated, those with limited incomes, laborers and tradesmen couldn't pass as Christian. And this composite profile tells you that most Jews, if you wanted to have a chance of survival, had to go into hiding. But the Germans employed the concept in Eastern Europe of collective responsibility. All Christians knew that to help a Jewish person was to risk one's life and the lives of family members. If you were caught hiding a Jew or helping a Jew in Poland or Eastern Europe, not Western Europe, you and your family were killed. If you denounced a Jew, I thought that Sean Riggins, who's on this Zoom, was hiding a Jewish person, and I was right. Sean, his family, and the Jews and the Jewish people that he was hiding, they were killed. And I, in Poland, would get a kilo of sugar and maybe a pair of boots. And if this were Ukraine, I would get a liter of vodka. And what the Germans would do is if you were you were on a farm, they would take the animals out of the barn. They would put the Jews and the entire Christian family in the barn and burn the barn. If you were in a little bigger, town, you might get hung from a meat hook in front of your home, or every Polish city has a square. It's a rennet. And they would build gallows in the rennet, and they would hang you in the rennet, and they would put a sign on you as "We Help Jews." So to hide a Jewish person in Poland and Eastern Europe was truly a matter of life and death. In Western Europe, if you were caught helping a Jewish person, you might not necessarily be killed. More often, you would be sent to concentration camp. And if you look at the story of Anna Frank, the 4 Christians who hid Anna and the 7 in that annex from July of 42 to August of 44, nothing happened to them. Meat Geese went in, she spoke fluent German, and she convinced the Germans that she knew absolutely nothing about people hiding in that annex. If a Jewish person survived the Holocaust and was not in a ghetto, a concentration camp, or with the partisans, that person received help from a Christian, whether it was food, paper, shelter, transportation. And by transportation, I'm talking about getting someone, remember I said at that 3rd stage, isolation, getting someone out of the ghetto and bringing them to the Christian side. Or if a Jewish person was already in hiding, and this is a home where Jews were hidden in far eastern Poland, in a small city, it was more of like a village outside, is if you thought that your neighbors were going to denounce you, you needed to take the Jewish person or persons you were hiding, and you needed to bring them to another place. So that's what we mean by transportation. Shelter, or the very act of not being denounced. If you look at Holland, and I know I said I'd focus on Poland, but if you look at Holland, some 33%, if not 40% of the Jews in Holland were denounced, like Anna Frank and those in that annex. They were denounced. So as insignificant, when we sit and we read rescue stories, and I hope many of you have spoken with survivors and have read their testimony, have read their memoirs and some their diaries. When you read rescue stories and you say, oh, well, they only hid them for 2 days. The absence of that act, however insignificant it might seem to us, some almost 80 years later, the absence of that act could more often than not be fatal. And so it's just important to understand, and it's never for us to judge why someone saved a Jew and why someone didn't. We did not walk, and may we never walk in their shoes. So how did rescue activities begin? In most cases, it was the Jewish person who sought help from a Christian. And help began gradually. Can you give me shelter for a night or two? I've gotten out of the ghetto, I've left my town. And there were all different kinds of ghettos. You had the Warsaw ghetto that had walls, barbed wire, and gates. You had the Łódź ghetto, which was a totally sealed ghetto. You couldn't get out. Warsaw ghetto, you can hear the stories of the smugglers. And you have some ghettos in Eastern Europe that were 2 blocks long, and they were pervious. You can get in and out. However, days, weeks, and months turned into years. Because 1939, 1940, no one knew how long the war would last. So let's look at the range of rescue activities. Helping Jews escape to safety. And here is a picture of the Danish rescue boat. And I can do a whole lecture on the rescue of the Jews of Denmark. And as we go into the month of August 1943 was a pivotal time in Denmark. And the rescue of the Jews of Denmark took place Rosh Hashanah 1943, and Denmark saved most of its Jews by taking them to Sweden. Hiding Jews, and this is a picture of 2 Jews coming out. This is after the war. And this photo was taken because this was a false cabinet. And this is where they hid for most of the war. The act of providing shelter was perhaps the most important item or activity that a non-Jew can do. Helping Jews pass as non-Jews. So I use the word Pole, and it's not a slur. These are people, I go to Poland before COVID 6 to 7 times a year because we send most of our money to the country of Poland, and I'll talk about that at the very end. But Poland was mostly was Catholic. And so when I talk about a Pole, I'm talking about someone who's not of the Jewish faith, who is more often than not Catholic. And so helping Jews pass as non-Jews, if you talk to survivors, you read their testimony for Jewish, if there were people who went and hunted Jews. You read Jan Grabowski's book, The Hunt for the Jews. They saw a man they thought was a Jew. They pulled down his pants to see if he was circumcised. They would stop women and they would say, do the catechism. You needed to be able to do in nomine Patris et Filius Spiritus Sanctus. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace. You needed to know your Catholic prayers. You needed to be able to pass as a Christian. And in Poland, in Hungary, in Lithuania, as Catholic. You needed to have protective papers. This is a document stating, complete with Nazi stamps, that the holder was Aryan. Providing food, medicine, and other essentials. Alerting Jews about pending actions. And that's how the Jews of Denmark were saved, because a German naval attaché leaked to the Danish underground the fact that the liquidation, the action against Denmark's Jews was going to occur the last day of Rosh Hashanah, October 1, 1943. You need to know that rescue was both individual and group, and this is a composite picture of the Jews of Jagoda. Jagoda is that part of the Polish underground that was set up to help Jews in hiding. And what you need to know is that the 2 women, and I'm not going to pronounce their names because I do not do it very well. One of the women who set up Jagoda had written, it was anti-Semitic. If you read her writings in a leading Catholic journal from the 1930s, hardly anti-Semitic. Yet she set up an organization that was established to help Jews in hiding. And here's a picture of Irina Sendler, and you'll see more about Irina later in this presentation. So there is a wide range of rescue activities, but the provision of shelter that could not be detected, that a Jewish person either stayed in for the entire time of the war, only coming out once or twice, where the Christians, the family hiding the Jews, many lived in earthen bunkers, and they would lower a chamber pot in the morning with food. They would take up a chamber pot with the body waste, and that's how they survived during the war. And we had a board member whose brother, she was in Eastern Poland, it is now Ukraine, she has passed on. Her brother died while in hiding. And what they did is the Christian family lowered a chamber pot with an axe, a saw, and they dismembered her brother day by day, and they brought his body parts up in a chamber pot. And the family, so the other neighbors would not see, buried him in the backyard. So when rescuers took in a Jewish person, again, no one knew how long the war would last. No one knew if someone like Alexander Roslin, if somebody would get sick, let alone die. Who are the rescuers? The rescuers, I will say as an aside, I have the most wonderful job, because when I go to Eastern Europe, where most of the rescuers that we support live, I meet the most wonderful men and women who, like the Mazurs from Krakow, will tell you they weren't heroes. They came from all walks of life. They were peasants and laborers, middle class and intellectuals, rich and poor, educated and illiterate. They were ministers, nuns. This is Sister Alfonso, who saved 13 children in an orphanage that she ran in Przemysl. They had different motives. They had limitations. But what you need to know, biography is not destiny. Because people had money and were educated did not mean that they were going to go hide Jews. Because someone was poor and had no means, it didn't mean that, I know it's a double negative, but they hid Jews. And there was no typical rescuer. Most were ordinary men and women. So I'm sure many of you know who Queen Elizabeth is and her late husband, Prince Philip. I don't know how many of you know about Prince Philip's mother, Princess Alice, or as she was also known, Princess Andrew, her husband's name, of Greece. She was in Greece during the war, and she saved the Cone family. Only 2 members of the Greek royal family remained in Athens, Princess Alice and one other member of the court. And she defied the Nazis. She is recognized by the state of Israel, and she's buried in Jerusalem. So rescuers came from all walks of life, and this is a picture of Alexander Roslin with David and Jacob Goodgeld. And this is Maria Farkas, who is from Budapest, and she's still alive. And this is Mariana Guanicek, and we used to call her Annie Oakley, but that is actually a flute. She's from Warsaw. And this is Alina Divasova from Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic now. When you talk to rescuers and you say, why did you do it? Why did you risk your life and those of your family? Most will tell you they did nothing special. They don't consider themselves heroes. Some had Jewish friends before the war, others did not. And as I mentioned, some were anti-Semites. Most who helped did not set out to rescue Jews. Help began gradually. Some rescuers took in Jewish people, and as the war went on, the stress became too great, and what they wound up doing is they wound up sending the Jews away. And that was a problem, because as you got deeper into the war, by 1943, many areas were Judenland, free of Jews. And if you sent the Jews you were hiding out and they were picked up by the Germans, collaborators, whomever, and they said, well, where have you been since 1939 if it was Poland, or the summer of 41 if it's the former Soviet Union? And they say, oh, I was down, I was here at this farm, then that family would be picked up too. So there were many issues to consider. And the rescuers are very, very, very special men and women. And what I think is important to know and to take away is that each act of rescue is different. Each story is unique. And the fact that it occurred is what is important. Because these men and women who risked everything, and many were very poor, they saved not only one life, they saved one Jewish person, or they saved a family. But in Hebrew, we say the door of the door, from generation to generation. They saved generations of Jews. And you will see that in the documentary. I wanted to, okay, and here is Irina Sendler. Irina Sendler worked in the Warsaw Ghetto. She was a health worker and was given permission to go into ghetto. The Germans were fearful of disease. It is an urban myth. She did not save 2,500 Jews. That is not the case. Deborah Dork interviewed her as head of the Children's Bureau for Zhigota, which I spoke about before. She registered almost 2,700 Jewish children in the Children's Bureau. But she was maybe smuggled, we're not sure of the number, 300, 400 children out of ghetto. And how did she do it? Because the Warsaw Ghetto, it was very difficult to get children out. They would put babies in burlap sacks because they had no morphia. They would tape their mouths shut, and she would go in a wagon, and the wagon master would have a German Shepherd or a dog like a German Shepherd with that kind of bark. And if the babies under the floorboards of the wagon started crying, he would hit the German Shepherd, he would hit the dog, so the dog would howl as they were going past the Jewish police, and on the other side, the Polish Blue Police. There was a church that the Germans left in the ghetto. And one side was into the ghetto side, the other side was the Aryan side. And the mothers would dress their children whatever clothes they had left, which were mostly rags by that time. And they went in as Sara or Miriam or Leah, and they came out as Christina, Maria, Nicholas, Bogdan. They went into the confessional, they were given a little cross, and they were told, this is your new aunt or your new babcia. Babcia is grandma in Polish. And they went out into another world. And Jewish children, when they were on the Christian side, because you had to give deference to the Germans, they were told, if you come by a German, you look at your toes, you look at your toes, you do not look up. There was a time when the court system had catacombs under the court system that went into the ghetto. The Germans didn't know about it initially, and many Jews were able to escape through the courts in Warsaw, and the building still exists. That was soon stopped. So these are rescuers. On our website, we have some 200 stories of rescue. They are perfect for a classroom period. And we're more than happy to help you with rescue, with ideas for classroom activities. We will be seeing a documentary about Master Sergeant Roddy Edmonds. Kune Sugihara and Aristides D'Souza Mendes were diplomats. Sugihara, representing the country of Japan, was in Kovno, Lithuania. We're talking 1940, before the Germans invaded the Soviet Union. And here you have Aristides D'Souza Mendes, who is from Portugal, who was stationed in Bordeaux, France. They were approached by Jews to say, give me transit visas, because for both Japan and for Portugal, in order to get to Portugal, you have to go through Spain, which was neutral. And in order to get outside of Lithuania, you have to go through the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, to get to Japan. You needed a transit visa. And both of these men telexed their respective governments in Lisboa, Portugal, and in Tokyo, Japan, saying, do I have permission to write visas? And both of them were told, no, 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 no Jews, no visas, no nothing. Both men decided to ignore their government, and both wrote visas. And for Sugihara, he did about 2,164 visas. An entire Jewish family could travel on one visa. The same for Portugal. These two men are responsible for saving some 10,000 persecuted Jews. They were both removed from their positions, stripped of their pension, stripped of their name, died in poverty and humility. They were just totally humiliated by their governments. It wasn't until the 1990s that both governments acknowledged the noble work and heroic deeds of both men. And they were, there's a word that's escaping me, but they were brought back, and both countries now celebrate the deeds of both of these gentlemen. Pastor Andre Tropmay was a Protestant pastor in South Central France on the plateau. They were Protestants in a very Catholic country, and they knew what it was like to be persecuted because they were a minority. And he is responsible for saving some 5,000 Jews, 12 villages. He was arrested by the Gestapo. Of the 5,000 Jews, it is estimated some 3,500 or 4,000 of the 5,000 Jews who were saved. About 3,500 were Jewish, others were political refugees. The villagers, these 12 Protestant villages, got the Jews safely over the mountains to neutral Switzerland. Documenting rescue. This is Olga Kukovic from Sarajevo. She dressed the Jews as Muslims. She's holding her Yad Vashem diploma. Yad Vashem gives a medal that's encased in an olive wood case, and they give a diploma in two languages, saying that this person risked their life to save Jews. The state of Israel, Yad Vashem, designates men and women as righteous among the nations. In Hebrew, it is Hasidei Ha'amot Ha'ulam, a title that unfortunately very few people hold. There is the Avenue of the Righteous, which is filled with trees. And in the early days of the program, trees were planted for the rescuers. Yad Vashem was established in 1953, and it included the provision to recognize righteous. However, it wasn't until after the Eichmann trial and his death that Israel started reaching out to identify the righteous and to name them as righteous among the nations. So here are some interesting facts and figures. These are the latest figures from Yad Vashem. Some 27,712 men and women have been recognized as righteous, 5 from the United States, and you're going to hear about Roddy Edmonds. He was the 5th to be recognized and the first American GI to be recognized. And you can see Poland, followed by the Netherlands, France, Ukraine, and Belgium, have the most number of rescuers. What the numbers tell us is that rescue took place in every country the Germans occupied, but rescue was rare. Even the highest estimates are less than 0.1% of the non-Jewish population of Nazi recognized Europe. Rescuers were indeed the precious few. I'm just checking the time. Good folks, there are no heroes without villains. Whatever the number, there were too few. And then again, there are always too few moral heroes in history. Jewish tradition teaches that for the sake of 36 righteous persons, the world is sustained. For the sake of 10 righteous persons, Sodom and Gomorrah would not have been destroyed, and that the saving of one life is tantamount to saving the entire world. Many worlds were saved by rescuers, as Professor Rosenthal said at the outset. But the rescuers were the precious few. If any of you go out of this program today, and when you return to the classroom and you teach the Holocaust, and if all you do is teach to rescue, I have failed. Please do not do that. You need to put rescue in the historical context, and I will discuss that in a few. But you need to understand it wasn't easy for someone to help. You need to look at the nature of the German occupation. When Germany occupied a country, they treated the population of that country where they saw that population fit on their racial hierarchy. So in Denmark, even though Denmark was occupied on April 9th, 1940, nothing happened. The Jews weren't wearing the Star of David. Nothing happened until August of 43, September. However, when you look at Poland, you look at the Ukraine, once the Germans were going to finish with the Jews, they were going to go address the Slavs. So you need to look at the nature of the occupation, the scarcity of basic resources, the degree of anti-Semitism in the community, and the extent of local collaboration. And there was collaboration in Poland, despite what is being said today. There was the Polish Blue Police. There were people who went, as I said, Jan Grabowski's Hunt for the Jews. There was collaboration in every country that the Germans occupied. You have to look at the degree of the integration of Jews into society. Very different in France than it was in Ukraine or Moldova or Belarus. And what was the timing of the war and the phase of the war? So look at Norway. Norway was not neutral. It bordered neutral Sweden, and it had, I think, about a 2,000-mile border, a land border. Yet 50% of Norway's Jews were murdered. Now, Norway had about 2,000 Jews. So about 1,000 Jews, give or take, were murdered during the Holocaust. Denmark had a body of water that had to be crossed, the Øresund, the body of water between Denmark and Sweden. And so you needed to understand the timing, because 1943, at the Battle of Stalingrad, the war was turning. Other hurdles, geographic, financial. And then we need to look at the moral dilemma, the consequences of getting caught. I happen to be an adoptive parent. I wanted my son David desperately. And I'm the social action lady at my synagogue, my shul. And I'm always calling people to, can we sleep with the homeless? Can you bring food for the kosher food pantry we have? But would I risk my son's life for people I do not know? for people who worship God differently, for people who don't speak my language, whether it's Polish or Lithuanian or Russian. There were moral dilemmas. And so it is not our place to judge, but we just need to understand the consequences and the situation in which these men and women found themselves in. So why should we teach about rescue? It was a rare phenomenon. It was part of the complex history. You know, when we work with teachers and we go in depth and we study the Shoah, many people do not realize how complex and how difficult this subject is. It is not boxcars from Berlin to Birkenau. There is much more to this subject that we all study. This is Oscar Schindler, and what you need to know, a range of responses did exist, and rescue highlights the promise, the hope of human potential, the capacity to make choices and to act on them. As Professor Rosenthal said, this is lessons of hope. And you read the stories and you realize that people had both the courage to care and the courage to act. And when you meet rescuers and they say, and I say, why did you do it? And they said, I'm a good Christian, I'm a good Catholic, I'm a good Lutheran. I follow the gospel, I listen to Jesus's teachings, or I'm a non-believer, but I believe in humanity and I believe in a better world. And you need to know that people did have choices. When you teach to rescue, it's important, as I said before, rescue must be placed into context. You need to teach the historiography of the Holocaust. You can't just teach to rescue and say, look, we all saved Jews. Just as I showed you before with the facts and figures, 0.1%, with 700 million people in Europe and Eastern Europe. Yad Vashem is recognized in 27,000 plus, and we'll never know that number because some of the survivors died after the war. Yad Vashem wasn't established. They didn't do testimony. Other survivors it was very hard for them to deal with their experience. And there's a procedure that has to be followed to recognize a non-Jew. So you need to put rescue in context. You need to explore the larger narrative, and you have to get beneath the halo. These are not saints. These are not angels. These are normal men and women. I talk to students and they go, I'm not Mother Teresa. I'm not Princess Diana. I'm not going to go out and hopefully don't step on a landmine, which was one of her charities that she was very involved with before her death. Or Mother Teresa, working with the poor in India. You need to get below the halo. They were normal men and women. They were teenagers. We have our students from New Jersey. They were your age. We have many rescuers that were 15, 16, and 17, and they went to their parents and they said, could you take my schoolmate in? Could you take Maria Farkas, saved one of her schoolmates, Suzanne Jacob, and her parents. The students went to their parents. Students hid Jews. So there were people like us. And when you teach to rescue, use plain language. They were not supermen and women. They were ordinary men and women. They are inspirations for today. They're heroes from the past. This is Irina Sendler. And last I visited Irina was about 6 weeks before she passed away. And this is Dr. Anna Bondo, who saved Lily Adler from the Warsaw Ghetto. This is Anna Bondo Stepnicka. You'll find her on our website. And Dr. Bondo is a retired physician, and she's president of Polish Society for the Righteous. Rescues offer a legacy of hope that people are very capable of holding on to values in the face of adversity. And there are always alternatives to standing by, even when the stakes are high. And what each of us needs to know, and especially our students that are with us today, each of you can make a difference. You can step in and you can be the change maker. You can give hope to others. You can stand up for the minority in our midst. You can truly make a difference. This lecture is entitled The Mirror of Goodness. We were founded by Rabbi Harold Shultz. And this is a quote from Rabbi. Goodness is a powerful mirror. Goodness challenges us in a way that evil does not. When you look at Eichmann, or Himmler, or Hitler, or Irina Sendler, or Alexander Roslin, or Oskar Schindler, compared to them, you know, I look at myself, but they were not saints. They were just normal people who said, not on my watch, who stood up when others refused. A little bit about the Jewish Foundation for the Righteous. As Gail said, I think we met in 1992, 93 through a colleague. And we provide monthly financial support to aging and needy non-Jews who are recognized by the state of Israel as righteous among the nations. We are currently sending money to 170 men and women in 16 countries. Over the years, at our highest, we were supporting 1,850 rescuers living in 34 countries. And we've sent $42 million. And we spend about, these days, about $1 million US dollars, which makes a difference because they're getting dollars in Albania, in Ukraine, in Moldova. And we send the money through different ways, but it's safe and secure. And we also have a teacher education program. And Gail, from the very beginning, Professor Rosenthal, we have a Centers of Excellence. And the center that Professor Rosenthal heads at Stockton University is one of our first Centers of Excellence invited into the program. There are only 13. And it is through the Centers of Excellence that teachers are nominated to attend our Summer Institute, which is based in New York City at Columbia University, and then join us for our advanced seminar, which is in January, or join us in Europe for our 2-week European study program. On our website, we have resources. We have some 190 stories of rescue. We have documentaries, which are available. They're on our website. They are perfect for a classroom period. Easy, you know, you can click on them. There's only one that is not available, and you all are going to see it. And the documentary on Roddy Edmonds, there's a short one. And I think Morgan is going to put it in the chat if she hasn't already. And you can use that. It's 15 minutes. The longer version is password protected. And I believe they're going to put a link to request the film for your students. All you have to do is fill out the form, educational use, not a problem. We'll send you the link, we'll send you the password. The password's good for 2 weeks. And we are here to be with you, to support you, and to help you in any way possible. And that's the end of my presentation on rescue. And I'm here to answer questions, and I will turn this back to Gail, Morgan, and Irvin.
Stanley, that was excellent. Thank you. And Irvin, I'm just going to ask you to take, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm clapping. And if there's something you missed, this has been recorded and it will be up on our website this summer as soon as we edit it. I want to say to all of you that because we're virtual and we're all at home or in a comfy place, if you need to take a break, do it, you know, and just come back and join us. We're going to be going straight through. I want to remind you that there will be an evaluation afterwards. Please fill it out. It's very important to us. You will also afterwards be receiving your PDH form. And I want to remind you that we have VIP guests today. 19 of them are high school students that are studying in dual high school credit. And so I'm going to ask Morgan I'm handing the microphone over to you. I know there are 2 students at Pleasantville High School that have questions, and because there are VIPs Maybe I should just hand it over to Darren. And would you allow each of your students to ask their question? And then Morgan will go to the questions that were posed in the chat. How does that sound, Stanley?
It sounds fine. And
Okay,
I must apologize for the background noise. My husband needs his morning double coffee fix.
okay, we get it. It's all good. That and hello again to Doug Survey's dog. Okay, we're ready. You're on, Darren.
I'm Jonathan. My question is, were there any consequences for the people who said that Christians were hiding any Jews, but when the Nazis went to go look, they didn't find any?
Very good question. Thank you so much. To the best of my knowledge, no, because the answer would be, you know what? We thought they were hiding Jews, and they must have been tipped off that you were on your way. And so the Jews went out into the field, or they went somewhere else. Remember I talked about transportation? When you thought you were going to be denounced, you needed to leave the house that I showed you in the PowerPoint. You needed to leave that bunker that was in the back by the pigsty, and they got them to someone else. So there was always some kind of answer that someone could give. But that's the first time I've been asked that question. So thank you.
Wow, so if we have any influence, Mr. Babno, that's an A for Jonathan today.
My name's Nicholas, and the question I had was, what happened to those people who lied about being a rescuer?
That's a very good question. You know, I traveled through mostly Eastern Europe more often than not. And people would, when people would visit, like Gail was talking, what Professor Rosenthal was talking, that she went with the survivor, and the survivor said, oh, you know, everybody says, because nowadays it's au courant to say you saved a Jew. I did the good thing. I did the noble thing. Nothing's going to happen to them. It's that, you know, we have people today who tell falsehoods, who think that certain things have happened. And when we strip away and we look at it, we know, gee, this really did not happen. They might be known as alternative facts, but to the best of my knowledge, nothing happens. You just say, that's, you know, when I go and I see someone, I say, oh, that's very nice. Can you show me, as this lady with the Super Soul bag, Pani Mazur, can you show me your Yad Vashem medal? Can you give me the name of the Jewish survivor that you saved? And when you find out that doesn't happen, you just leave and say, thank you very much. It is not for me to, you know, say you're lying or you're doing this or you're doing that.
Mr. Babno, do you have a question before we move on? You're our VIP teacher today, teaching summer school.
Another student had a question, right?
Oh, thank you, Morgan. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jalen. I was wondering, what did other citizens in other countries do to help people who needed to be rescued?
What did other citizens in other countries do? They did the similar things. So in France, you had what was called transit camps that were not concentration camps, but thousands, tens of thousands of people died in Gurs, Results, Stronsay. You had the Quakers, you had the Red Cross, you had OSE go in and take mostly Jewish children and some young adults out of those transit camps and put them in homes with Christians. So, and you had in Amsterdam, with, for those of you who've read Anne Frank, and I hope if you teach the Holocaust, you teach more than the Anne Frank story. The 4 Christians who hid those 7 Jews in their annex for 26 months, they brought food. They brought news from the outside. They brought hope. So you find similar activities, whether it's Belgium, whether it was Italy, France, Luxembourg, the Netherlands. as well as other countries. And in Albania, which was ethnic Muslim, Albania saved all of its Jews. And that's a whole other lecture on the concept of Besa, which is the Albanian community initially years ago invited the Jews into Albania. There were 200 Jews that were living in Albania and some 1,800 that came from Yugoslavia, Kosovo, and went down through the Balkans into Albania. So the rescue activities were the same in every country, providing forged documents. Raoul Wallenberg and the diplomats in Budapest giving out Schutz passes, saying that they were they were under the protection of the Swedish crown, providing hiding places, and getting Jews to neutral countries. And one other thing that I need to say, in order to be recognized by the state of Israel, you had to do it for altruistic purposes. If I paid Doug Survey to save me, I happen to be Jewish, to save me, my family, Doug would not get recognized because Doug would have to have saved me and hidden me and did whatever he did to help us for no remuneration at all. It's strictly for altruistic, pure purposes. And that's why many people like what we do, because the men and women who did what we did, they were not, black marketeers. They were not, border runners who you had to pay $3,000 to get you from Hungary into Romania and then somewhere else. So I meant to say that when I was giving my my formal presentation.
I got a question as well. My name's Joshua, and I was wondering, what were the conditions like in Europe to make it essentially worth risking a Jew's life for some like a kilo of sugar, like a pair of boots?
What were the conditions like for, you cut out? I'm sorry. I'm in the mountains in North Carolina right now, and the internet's a little spotty.
I was going to ask, what were the conditions like in Europe to make it worth, risking life?
We're talking Eastern Europe, and if you're going, and I hope sometime you can go with your teachers to Eastern Europe or into what we now know as the former Soviet Union. You're talking about very, very poor people. And when the Germans came in, let's say you had one cow and a couple of roosters, some chickens and a pig. The Germans probably took your cow, they took your pig, and you had nothing to live on for yourself. And so a kilo of sugar during the war, food was rationed. You had, here in America, we had ration coupons. And I assume that Professor Rosenthal has and Professor Survey have examples of American ration coupons. You had Ken cards, you had coupon books, and you were only permitted to get certain kinds of food and certain amounts. So a kilo of sugar, which is 2.2 pounds, was like amazing. You didn't have pastries, you had bread made without sugar. Usually depending on the bread you make, I'm a baker, you put sugar in. So it was a lot. And then if you're in Ukraine, vodka was a staple, especially if you're in the countryside and also in the city. So it was a lot, and people took the time to find Jews and say, here, I found you a Jew, and give me whatever you're giving out, or a pair of boots. Because goods, when the Germans came in, they stripped countries of their natural resources and their physical resources, and goods were scarce. Shoes were worn and reworn and resold and home-stitched when they fell apart.
I would like to make an offer to Pleasantville High School students, our VIPs, that we will come back. How is that? At some point, if they would like us to answer more of their class questions. Is that a deal, Stanley?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Listen, for Mr. Dabnew, if you want me to do something special for your students, You're a colleague of Gail's. Anything you want, just ask, it's yours.
And Darren Babno was my student at Stockton, so I'm so proud. So that's great, so that we can transition. Just Darren, you wrote in the chat to me that you had a question, and then we're going to turn it over to Morgan to handle the other questions that are in the chat.
I lost my question. Go ahead.
Well, if you think of it, Darren, just let us know in the chat and we'll, unmute you again. Okay.
All right.
All right. So the first question is from Barbara Daniel. Barbara, I'm going to ask you to unmute and you can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. Hi, Stanley. Nice to see you again.
Hi, Barbara.
The question I had was really for after the war. I was wondering if the people, particularly somewhere like Poland, people who had helped, who had actually rescued or hidden people, whether they got any flack from their neighbors or friends for actually helping.
Okay, the answer is yes.
Okay.
And I run the Jewish Foundation for the Righteous. This is a kind of a digression. We have two kinds of letterhead. One that goes to the United States and Western countries. And on the letterhead is a picture of a rescuer. Can you see this? This is Victoria Shipiot and the little girl she saved, Hannah Sachs. And on the back is her story. We do everything we can to teach. My business card has pictures of righteous Gentiles with the story on the back. For our rescuers, the word Jewish does not appear. This is a totally different, and the letterhead, it just says JFR. There were consequences. And on our website, there's a story of the Boronic family in Lithuania. They saved 3 brothers and their brother's friend. All the men are now passed on. And when the war was over, their Lithuanian neighbors, and Lithuania is Catholic, found out that they had hidden these 4 Jewish boys. They were 16, 17, 9. There were 3 brothers. They were teenagers, the same age probably as Joshua and the students who asked me those great questions. Their neighbors came and beat the living daylights out of the father. There was a father, a brother, and 3 sisters. And for those of you who traveled with me to Lithuania, you met 2 of the surviving sisters who have since passed on. And they beat the living daylights out of them because they learned that they had saved Jews. We have another family, and the survivor is in Boston and may be willing to come via Zoom for a lecture. Also from, she was from Gudraicha, Lithuania, and they lived next to the Catholic Church. They lived over their store, and the brother was killed by his high school friends. And this family, the Ruskas family, Egala and her brother Aramis and their older sister Leopadia, who is deceased, saved Mary Katz and her mother and her father. And when the war was over and the Ruskas family lived on a farm in the middle of nowhere. I've been there. I've been to where the house was. It's like abandoned. It's the middle of nowhere then and now. And their neighbors learned that they saved the Katz family from the big town of like 2,000 people. The Ruskas family fled their farm, moved in with the Katz family in Gudraicha. When the Katz family left for America, they deeded their home to the Ruskas family. And to this day, the granddaughter and the great-granddaughter, because I've been there, live in the former Katz home. So the answer to Barbara Daniel's question is yes, there were consequences. And nowadays they're in their 90s, late 80s, 90s, some are in their hundreds. What they did when they were teenagers, when they were in their 20s, they don't want people right now with the rise in anti-Semitism in certain parts of the world. They do not want people to know. I have a
Very-
rescuer in Germany who lives in Munich, and she refuses to let us tell her story online because she's afraid of the Nazis.
And for me, when
thank
I visit Helene and Jan Mazur, that's what they said to me. Don't tell my neighbors. My neighbors do not know.
All right, so the next question is from Gigi. I'm going to ask you to unmute Gigi.
Hi, Stanley. That was incredible.
Hi, Gigi. Gigi and I just met, and
Thank
Gigi's from California, so she's been up since 5:30.
No, I'm actually in Michigan right now, but thank you
Okay.
so much for letting me know about this as a middle school teacher. I've learned things I did not know before. Thank you so much. So my question is about the governments of Portugal and Japan. It took them so long. I mean, I know that governments aren't always the swiftest in terms of making amends and all of that, but why so many years? What was going on that they weren't able to?
It wasn't, I can't speak for either government of Japan or Portugal. It didn't happen. You had tens of thousands of Jews, you had thousands of Jews alive today, not tens, but thousands of Jews in the 60s, 70s, and 80s who were alive because of Sugihara and Mendes. And it took the governments however long to reinstate them and to restore their reputation. And you're going to see the film about Roddy Edmonds. I work with Pastor Edmonds, and if any of you want the documentary for your classroom, and maybe Doug, if the Jersey Commission wants to have Pastor Edmonds, who I work very closely with, come and do a program after COVID, please talk to me and we might be able to fund you, provide some funding. We have been unable to get the Congressional Medal of Honor for Roddy Edmonds, and he saved 200 Jewish lives. We've been working on this since the Obama administration. So, but you have to watch the documentary and then you make a decision whether or not you think he's worthy of it. But it's a good question, Gigi.
All right, so I have another question in the chat from someone who can't use their microphone, so I'm going to read it for them. So it was, Stanley, back when you were referring to each rescuer and rescuer story as unique, the question is, if I only have 1 or 2 days to teach about rescue, where should I begin and end? And also, what are the lessons for today?
Okay, thank you. The first thing I'd say to the teacher who asked, where do you live? Does your town have a sister city in Eastern Europe? Do you have a sister city? Maybe there's a rescuer in that city. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, look at the socioeconomic status of your students. Do many of them come from Ukraine or Poland or Germany? Perhaps yes, perhaps no. Then pick a country that works. Read the stories and see what resonates. Maybe you might want to take the story of a teenager who saved Jews. So, or you want to look at someone like Irina Sendler or Alexander Roslin who saved children, because you're working, I don't know if you're a middle school teacher or a high school teacher. So read through the stories. Maybe you might want a Muslim rescuer, the Vaseli family, or Hikmet and Zima. He founded otolaryngology in Albania. Or maybe you want Jervis and Korkut, who not only saved one of the leading manuscripts, the 14th century Sarajevo Haggadah, but also hid a Muslim girl. And when you had the war in Kosovo, for that story, they were ethnic Muslims. And when we had the war in Kosovo, his daughter and grandchildren, he was deceased, fled. And the only thing they took with them was their Israeli diploma for her parents and the medal, and they made their way into Kosovo, and they found an Israeli MASH unit, and the Israeli military flew the entire family to Israel. And when they arrived at Ben Gurion Airport, she was met by the son of the woman her parents had saved. Or maybe you show Schindler, part of Schindler's List, and you look at Oscar Schindler, or you take someone you've never heard of from a place you do not know. So take the time and look through the stories. And if you want to contact me, I can probably send you a tribute book that it's a bound book that we use for our events, which we're not, our fundraising events, which we're not doing anymore. So I do not have very many left. And you can go through it and you can look and see what story resonates to you. But they're listed on our website by country and alphabetically, and the lessons that everybody can make a difference, that we have decisions to make. We are here in this world, hopefully, for not just ourselves. It's like you throw the pebble in the water and you have a series of concentric circles that go out. Your universe of obligation extends to more than just yourself or your parents or your spouse or your neighbors. Unfortunately, during the Holocaust, the Jews were in no one's universe of obligation except for the righteous. So you have a universe of obligation. Use it wisely, use it well, and be a good citizen in this wonderful country that we have. Those are my lessons.
Thank you, Stanley. And I just wanted to, if I could, take a second to highlight some of the excellent comments that are in the chat by some of the educators who are also offering some of the things that have worked for them. Gigi, also, you mentioned, find or let the kids find things that they care about and what they want to learn about. And she mentioned the short movie Pigeon from Facing History and Ourselves. Barry Kopp mentioned his past projects that he's given students a choice of 30 rescuers and they do a PowerPoint. And Gail also mentioned the reference, the universe of obligation. You can find more about that in Facing History and Ourselves. And thank you, Irvin, for putting the link in the chat. So I wanted to move on to another question, Stanley, that I received privately in the chat. So the question is, do you consider the decision of the Dominican Republic at the Evian Conference in July 1938 as an act of rescue? And to add on to that, there was some comments in the chat about the kinder transport, the British kinder transports.
Right.
So maybe you could talk about both of those.
The Evian Conference, which was held in Evian, France, was to discuss what was going to happen to the German Jews. This is before the outbreak of the war on September 1, 1939. I think the Evian Conference was what, 36, 37? Not one country, with the exception of the Dominican Republic, agreed to take Jews. They took about 600 Jews and they went to Sasua, okay? And we're talking German Jews. This is before the Anschluss. And they took 600 Jews. And if you look at the historiography, there are multiple motivations. Some said it was to lighten the population, because the German Jews were Caucasian. And in the Dominican Republic, you had multiple races. Some said it was because the Jews were going to bring education and economic knowledge. And so I think that there are multiple reasons why the Dominican government, the only one in the world, said we will take Jews. They took 600. They had multiple reasons. If you were one of those 600 Jews, if you were the child or the grandchild or the great-grandchild of one of those Jews, and I have met several, you're here today because the Dominican government took you in. So while people had different motives, they might not have been pure motives, they might have been mixed, they might have been all altruistic, you have people who were saved. So I consider it an act of rescue, whatever the motivation of the Dominican government was. And I am not knowledgeable. And I mean, I never talked to the head of the Dominican government. I was not alive then, as to why, but there's several, theses have been brought out. But I consider it an active rescue. The kinder transport, which was not entirely all Jewish children, but mostly Jewish children, was also an active rescue. Remember, this took place before the outbreak of the war. And you're talking, about Jews that came from Austria, Germany, and Bohemia and Moravia. That part that the Germans occupied before the outbreak of the war. So I consider them to be rescue activities. I have a friend who is with the Anne Frank Funds. He runs the Anne Frank Funds in Basel. Funds is foundation in German. It's has a medical arm, and we work with them, and they send medications to the rescuers in Eastern Europe. And John Goldsmith and his sister run the kinder transport. And they went to Great Britain from Germany. And then when the bombing came, the bombing of London, the Brits, which very few people know, sent a group of children, British Christian children, British Jewish children for kinder transport. John and his sister went to Indiana. Somehow they were chosen to get out of the bombing of London, and he spent the war years in Indiana. He's now back in Basel. He also has a home elsewhere, and he goes back to Britain. He never went back to Germany. So I consider them rescue. It was a different time and a different place. It was when you can still get Jewish children and adults out. But as you get closer to the outbreak of the war, it becomes more and more difficult. And these were special programs which negated the need for not all, but a fair amount of the paperwork. For those of you who know David Wyman's work, Abandonment of the Jews or Paper Walls, the requirements for Jewish adults and to get their families out, not through a special program, is extremely difficult.
Thank you, Stanley. And I think we're going to transition to the film at 11, but I think we have time for one last question. So there was another question in the chat. Why did some rescuers not want to be recognized after World War II?
Some rescuers didn't want to be recognized because it goes back to one of the earlier questions, where some people didn't consider themselves heroes, okay? They did what any Dane, what any Frenchman, what any Italian, what any Pole would have done. And we know that's not the case. And others did not want their neighbors to know that they saved Jews.
And I see, thank you, Stanley. And I see that Darren has, his question has popped back into his head. Darren, do you want to unmute and ask the question?
So Stanley, I heard mentioned several times that JFR provides support to those who have been declared righteous. Is that a predetermined or set thing, or is it just when needed?
Is it a predetermined or set thing or just?
When it's needed.
Oh no, we give money to the day they die. I've been funding people for 29 years. People, when you're recognized as a righteous Gentile by Yad Vashem, and they have their set of criteria, and what you need to know is that to do a review in Israel, and this is how important the state of Israel considers rescuers to be. The Commission on the Righteous, up until a few years ago, was headed by the Chief Justice of Israel's Supreme Court, which would be John Roberts, would be sitting at a committee meeting looking at applications from Jewish survivors, because it's the survivor who makes the application on behalf of the rescuer. So when we learn about a rescuer nowadays, last year we funded 5, but most of the rescuers have passed on. And the people that Israel's recognizing are deceased. So it's going, the awards are going to the children or the grandchildren. We do not fund non-recognized individuals. So when we fund someone, and our requirements are, you have to be recognized by Yad Vashem. You have to be born before 1934. You have to be in financial need. We never, if you're not in financial need, you don't need our money. You're taking it away from someone who's poor. So we send money based on monthly awards. I just sent money. I was in New Jersey. We have another home in North Carolina. And I just sent money for May, June, July, and August to all the rescuers in 16 countries. We send it safely and efficiently. And at Christmas, we'll probably send everybody, in addition to their regular award, a Christmas bonus of $2,500, which is like my giving many of you $20,000 extra. In Ukraine, we have a rescuer whose monthly pension is $14. So the money is until the day they die. And then if they want a Christmas award, a funeral grant, we will pay for a tombstone. And if any of you go to Eastern Europe, I know you go to Jewish cemeteries. I take my teachers to the leading Catholic cemetery in Poland because we visit Irina Sendler's grave. Catholic cemeteries and Russian Orthodox cemeteries are very different from Jewish cemeteries. Very, very important for people of faith. And we provide a funeral grant, and we also send medications through the Anne Frank funds. So Darren, this is, you need the money, you write me, and the process is fairly short, and we start funding immediately.
Thank you, Stanley. And I'm going to begin the transition and remind everyone that we don't have a set break time. If you need to take a break, please do. We will be ending promptly in 1 hour. And I give you a quick background to say that I am a certified teacher. And I know that from my work in the classroom in middle school and high school, before I came here to Stockton, when students can relate to whatever the subject matter can be, it makes all the difference. And so building on what you spoke about the Dominican Republic, when I have students whose heritage is the Dominican Republic, talking about the AVN conference in 1938 makes a big difference. And moving on to the next subject area about rescue and the heritage of the person who is the rescuer and where they came from. So many of our students here at Stockton University, and I'm sure that's true for all of you that are teaching in the United States, is many of our students, either their parents, and for us on the college campus, sometimes they're veterans from the US Army. I've even had students from other armies, but generally it's from the US Army. And if it's not them, it's their parents. If it's not their parents, it's their grandparents that are veterans of the Korean War, sometimes World War II, or great grandparents. And then we move into their parents, their cousins, because we have a scholarship that's just for veteran families, and they defined anybody in your family that is a veteran, including a half brother, half sister, etc. And so when we knew that we had to last minute, because of Maud's conflict for today, change our schedule, I said to Stanley, let's do the film about Roddy Edmonds, and we'll put his name in the chat because so many of our students can relate to where he was part of the US Army. And I'm going to now turn the introduction of the film over to Stanley. And Stanley, thank you for our first portion. You can always judge, evaluate a seminar workshop into the quality for the quality of the questions. The quality of the questions were amazing. Everybody gets it. And thanks so much.